Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. In this episode, I want to talk about Larry Flynt in relations to John Delorean and my dad. It's a very fascinating little tale I'm going to tell. But I wanted to start right off the gate saying, those of you listening to the podcast who've been following me for a while, you've noticed that the frequency of my uploading has gone down since the birth of my son. Actually, a little bit before the birth of my son, I would say, until after the birth of my son. I used to do, at the peak, 5 podcasts per week, and then it whittled down to about 2 or 3 as we got nearer to my son's birth, and now it's down to just the one podcast. I basically upload the broadcast as the podcast. I don't really have a timeline for when I plan on getting back to at least 2 podcasts a week, so the broadcast and then a separate individual podcast. I hope to get there at some point, but anybody who's listening to this, who's had a child, knows exactly what I'm talking about. It is difficult. Actually, as I was coming to record this broadcast, I just sat down to record the broadcast. My son started screaming downstairs, went downstairs, fed him, changed a diaper. He had a blowout while he was feeding, which is kind of nice because we were putting him to bed and we know, okay, well, he's probably good for another 12 to 24 hours between having another blowout. Either way, his stomach is full and his butt is empty. He should sleep just fine now. So that's what I dealt with right before recording this broadcast today. So hands are full in the best way possible. I am not complaining at all. Having my firstborn son is by far the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I freaking love that kid. I love Riker. I love smooching his cheeks. Probably too much. It might give him some sort of a complex. I am very schmoozy and smoochy on that boy, huggy on that boy. I just love being a dad. I always knew that at some point in my life I would be a father when the time was right. I always kind of felt like, when I go on dates with girls, they're like, what do you think about kids? And I'm like, whenever the time comes, what they were listening for, what they were hoping for was to meet a guy, go on a date with a guy who was, oh yes, I love kids, I'm just all about it. And to tell you the truth, I wasn't that way for most of my life. I was not against having kids. I just wanted to wind up with the right person who I felt was a good candidate to be a mother to the child, have a stable home, have a home, paying a mortgage on a home. And I know none of this is required for having a kid. I mean, obviously I know, but for me personally, call me old-fashioned, I wanted to set up a very stable environment first to have a child. That means getting to know my wife intimately, not just that kind of intimately, but knowing her for a long enough time to say this would be an excellent mother for my child. This person will love the child and nurture the child exactly as much as me, if not more so. I just wanted everything to be right. So when women would ask me the question, do you want kids? It was kind of a that depends thing. And I don't know you that well yet to tell you whether or not I want kids. I don't want kids just to have kids. I want the time to be absolutely as correct as it can be before having a child. And so that's kind of a loaded question to ask on a date. Now, if the response was, I love kids, that's one thing, of course. But mine was way more calculated and reserved. That being said, I love being a dad. I love being a dad with every shred of my being. I did not realize how much I would love being a father. And this is probably what this first segment's going to be about. I'm just relating to you. This is Geek Therapy Radio. You're having a little bit of geek therapy here about having a son. And that's important and that's critical because as a geek, I'm fascinated by a lot of things. I think a lot of people listening right now can relate to that. And the motto of the show is that we are all geeks about something, whether it's muscle cars or video games or music or art or whatever it is. We're all geeks about something. So the idea of having a child is a little bit scary. And I'll be honest, there's a little tinge of selfishness in there. If you're really honest with yourself, it's, man, if I have a kid, that means I can't do whatever I want whenever I want. I can't be up in my man cave or the geek studio recording podcasts whenever I want, making YouTube videos whenever I want, making music whenever I want, drinking alcohol whenever I want, making my drink and coming up to the man cave and the geek cave and playing with the Commodore 64 while I throw back rum and cokes. That's not going to happen when you have a kid. Your priorities change. And so there's that little kind of twinge, like I said, of selfishness. Wow, when the kid comes along, that means I'm going to have to put all that stuff on the back burner and the child's going to come first. And guess what? The child does come first. And guess what? It's the best thing in the world. It is absolutely, without a doubt, the coolest thing that has ever happened to me. So putting my geek things aside for a minute, or figuring out, I guess a better way to put it is figuring out where the geek thing, my geek things and my hobbies and my passions kind of fit into my life now, where Riker, my son, takes priority. And the groove I'm kind of falling into, you kind of fall into this, you figure out what works best for you. Whenever I hear people tell me I don't have time for any hobbies anymore because I have kids and a job and whatever, I've got kids and a job, and everyone's situation is different, don't get me wrong. And I won't go off really long in this diatribe, but it's not so much that having a job and having children completely eliminates the time that you used to have for your hobbies and your passions. You're not working on your old muscle car anymore because you have a kid and a job. That's not really what happens. If you not in a lot of cases, that's not what happens in a lot of cases. Let me reiterate that. I've mentioned this before. Whenever people ask me about that or say something about that, it's usually on social media. It's like usually a comment on something. I'm just like, how many hours per week do you spend on social media? So is it that your child has gotten in the way of your hobbies and passions, or is it that the screen time has slowly inched its way into your life and started to boil you, like the frog boiling in the pot doesn't realize it's boiling? How much screen time has taken over your hobbies and passions? So what I'm finding a groove in my life is I've got Riker in one hand and I'm tinkering with the Raspberry Pi in the other. Twister OS is the best operating system for Raspberry Pi, by the way. Twister OS for the Raspberry Pi. But I'm finding all this out, and I still have a child. I'm doing all this with a child and a job. So it is possible. Everyone's situation is different. I'm just saying it is possible. Let's talk about Larry Flynt coming up. More Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Real quick, just to remind you, gotta plug all the social media and the YouTube and everything. Geek Therapy Radio on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Where else am I? GeekTherapyRadio.com. Just type in Geek Therapy Radio into Google or your favorite podcast app or YouTube and look for the red, white, and black color scheme. If you type in Geek Therapy Radio or Geek Therapy Radio Podcast into any search portal and any app, wherever you are, just look for the red, white, and black color scheme. I can't stress that enough. If it's red, white, and black in some form or fashion, that's me. That is this brand of Geek Therapy Radio. There's not very many other brands of Geek Therapy Radio. I think I've mentioned before, there's a podcast called GT Radio. It's on a whole different network. It's not affiliated with me. I think their colors are like green and white and yellow or something like that. Nothing against them. They're not a rival. This is not a zero-sum game. But if you want this brand of Geek Therapy Radio, no matter what you type Geek Therapy Radio into or Geek Therapy Radio Podcast into, if you see any form of red, white, and black color scheme, that's me. Do you ever just look around your workspace and just... you have to clean it. Like it's just all of a sudden it seems very cluttered and claustrophobic, and the walls kind of closing in on you, and you feel like, oh gosh, I gotta sterilize this a bit. That's what happened to me before recording this broadcast. I'm looking at my desk in the man cave in the geek cave here in the geek studios, and I've got that Tascam 688 cassette recorder on there that records 8 tracks of analog audio to a single 1/8-inch cassette tape. It's a wonderful piece of gear, but it takes up so much space. It is a huge chonkin' piece of gear, and I'm asking myself, do I need this on my desk? When is the last time I used this? How often do I use this? Does it need to take up all this real estate? It doesn't. And that doesn't mean that I'm never going to use it again, or I'm not going to use it again in the near future. But I thought, for as often as I do use it, I can keep it nearby. I can keep it in, behind me in storage in the closet, under the bed, something like that. For when I need to use it, I'll just whip it out, plug it in, and use it. It doesn't need to live on the desk, taking up space on the desk. And then I just got to looking at the desk in general. I'm thinking, I need to simplify this a little bit, to be creative, if that makes sense. I like to start projects with a clean slate. Anybody who knows me, who's grown up with me, who's known me my whole life, knows that I'm not a neat freak. I like things to be, you watch the show Hoarders and you just wonder, like, how can that even be possible? So I'm not like that. And I've got a bunch of nostalgic stuff, Commodore 64, Atari 520 ST. I've got like a dozen Game Boys up to my right in front of a stack of NES cartridges, next to a Super Nintendo and its cubby, next to the GameCube and its cubby, 3DO and its cubby, the first Xbox and its cubby. I've got like 3 arcade sticks, like fight sticks for playing Street Fighter, up in their cubbies. A handful of laptops and Palm Top computers and Palm Pilots and PSPs and all sorts of stuff, all in their own kind of cubbies, cassette players, Walkman. I've got the 286 computer right above my head on a shelf. So everything is kind of in its place, in a place for everything, so it's out of the way. But the workspace, the desk that I'm working on, the desk that I'm sitting in front of right now to record the podcast, it was closing in. There's too much crap. There's cables running everywhere. Like I mentioned in the outro of the last segment, I've been tinkering with my Raspberry Pi a lot this week with my son Riker in my arm, and I've officially established and I officially endorse Twister OS as being the best operating system in my opinion for the Raspberry Pi. It's awesome. It has so much awesome software baked into it. It's really, really cool. Anyways, so I had the cables running around. I had my USB microphone plugged into it. I had headphones plugged into that. The Ethernet cables, all the USB stuff just dangling off the desk. That Tascam 688, like I'm talking about. The 286 was underneath my monitor somewhere with a keyboard on top of it. Like, I don't use any of this stuff. I'm done with the Raspberry Pi project for now. It's downstairs hooked up to the giant 70-inch TV down there. I was like, but I don't need all this stuff on my desk. So I clean. And even my mechanical keyboard and my mouse, it's Corsair. Oh, I forget the exact model of them, but it's RGB and it's got the Cherry MX switches in there, or maybe I think they're Browns. It's mechanical, but it's soft. It doesn't make clicky. Anyways, they're mechanical keyboards and gaming mice. They're big. They take up space. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to plug in a wireless dongle into my PC and use my Logitech wireless keyboard and mouse. Just cut the cables running across the desk. So I'm looking at my most kind of sterile desk that I've had in years. And I think a lot of people listening can relate to that. And I promise we're going to talk about Larry Flynt and Delorean and my dad here in a moment. Probably towards the end of this segment leading into the next, however long that takes. But I think a lot of people can relate to wanting a clean working area before they begin a project. People who aren't necessarily neat freak people, who aren't clean people, who, if anybody knows you, if you're listening and you're like that, they would probably say you're a messy person, because creative people tend to be messy. But that's not necessarily the case if you're anything like me. When you're elbow deep in a project, in a creative activity, yes, your workspace can be awry. Everything's out where you need it. If you're a musician, you got cables running everywhere, gear running everywhere. It looks like a cluttered rat's nest of a mess because you are 75% of the way through a project, and that's just the way the workspace has become as you work through the project. But, so if anybody walks in on you 75%, 80% through any sort of project, even if you're a painter or something like that, and they just see paint everywhere, in instruments everywhere, cables everywhere, gear everywhere, easels everywhere, oil painting, like all over the place. If somebody walked into you at that stage of the creative process, they'd walk away saying, wow, creative people really are really messy. But that's not really the case a lot of the time. They start with a clean blank slate, and it becomes messy and cluttered as they work. And then when they're done with that project, they can't stand, they're too close to it. They've been too close to it. You know what I'm talking about. You've been too close to it for days, weeks, months, sometimes even years. And as soon as you're done, as soon as you've kind of pulled that trigger in your brain where you said, I'm done with this project, as soon as you make that leap in your brain, if you're anything like me, you can't stand the sight of the mess that process has created. You appreciate what you're able to do, but it's like as soon as it's done, I need clean slate. I need to get all this crap off my desk. I've been playing with that 688 for the past few weeks. I need it off my desk. It's taking up space. I need to start fresh so that I know what something new I can build upon out of this fresh, clean slate. And that's what I did before the broadcast. And I just relating that to you, my fellow geeks, because I know we're a lot like that. When I work on the DeLorean, I'm going to relate this to car people now. When I work on the DeLorean and I've got screws everywhere and cowls and fans and tools and bits of God knows what all over the place, towels, rags, oil, stuff like that. When I'm done with the project, like when you get the cooling, I replaced the cooling fans recently. When it's done, like I couldn't stand the freaking sight of that garage area around the DeLorean where I was working on. I needed to clean it up, at least somewhat. I needed to put order to the chaos. It's like the job isn't done until you put things back in order. You love the work, it's messy work, but you can't wait to put it back in order so that you know what to do next. So that you know that when you start the next thing, there's a clear defined starting point. You know it's gonna get messy, but at least you want to start with a clear defined, clean working area, clean, fresh mind going into the next project. And that's what I did before recording the broadcast today, and I think a lot of people can relate. So Larry Flynt said that he had some audio evidence, some tapes concerning John DeLorean. In this case, he going towards John DeLorean's innocence. That is a very fascinating story. It didn't really turn out to be the case. And Larry Flynt passed away this week, so let's talk about that fresh, going into the third segment, which is the longest segment, 11-minute segment. Let's dive in to Larry Flynt. That sounds weird, knowing who Larry Flynt is, or was. God rest his soul. But let's talk about that. Larry Flynt coming up, Geek Therapy Radio. Go to geektherapyradio.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Go to geektherapyradio.com and drop me a line. And I reiterate, when you contact me through geektherapyradio.com or just my email, johnny@geektherapyradio.com, that does not put you on any sort of mailing list. It doesn't sign you up for jack squat. It's literally just to send me a message. Hey, what's up? Let me know what your geek thing is. Hey, you mentioned cars in your last show. I've got a 1967 Chevy, whatever. Let me know. Send me pictures of that. Oh my gosh. Yes. Whatever you're geek about. If you're a musician and you want to show me your music, or even possibly I could use it as bump music, let me know. I'd love to help showcase. Let me preface that by saying, if you send me a bunch of music with F-bombs and the N-word and just all over the place, I'm not playing that on the radio. I'm not playing that on my podcast either. It's not without heavy editing. So if your music's like that, send it to me. I'll listen to it personally. I'll dig it. But obviously I can't play that stuff on the radio, and the podcast is PG, so I can't be doing any of that kind of nasty stuff. Speaking of nasty stuff, so Larry Flynt passed away this week. Larry Flynt was a longtime peddler of smut magazines, of skin mags, and I'm not saying this to denigrate him or throw judgment or anything like that, but that was his legacy, was skin mags, was publishing smut magazines, pornographic magazines. But Larry Flynt was also a massive proponent for free speech. Obviously, I mean, the magazines he published, he pushed the boundaries of free speech his entire life. He was a huge freedom fighter for free speech and freedom of speech. And this got him into trouble several times in his life. One of those times is what I alluded to earlier and what we're going to talk about in this segment, and maybe a little bit beyond, I don't know, was that it all became personal. It's kind of a personal story because my dad is tied up in this. The Larry Flynt saga, John DeLorean, I have a DeLorean, is tied up in this saga. So I just kind of want to tell the tale from that perspective. And you know what I'm going to start with? I'm going to start with this New York Times article from December 10th, 1983, which was only a few months after I was born. I was born in September, October, November, December, like 4 months or 3.5 months earlier. I was about Riker's age, actually. As of recording right now, I was about Riker's age when this happened, when this news article came out from the New York Times. I'm going to read it verbatim because it's a good starting point to my story here. So the headline is this: Hustler publisher tells judge DeLorean tape was a fake. Larry Flynt, publisher of Hustler magazine, testified today that a tape recording purportedly containing a government informant's threats against John Z. DeLorean, the automobile manufacturer accused in a $24 million cocaine deal, was a fake. The 40-year-old publisher appeared before federal district judge Robert Takasugi in response to a contempt citation that the judge issued last month when Mr. Flynt refused to say where he got the tape. Under questioning from James Walsh, an assistant United States attorney, Mr. Flynt said he got the tape from a mystery man he identified only as the Samurai. He said his ultimate source has been critically injured as a result of providing the tape and receiving medical treatment in China. Samurais are from Japan, by the way. The actual delivery was by John Pauley with CBS, Mr. Flynt added. Reporter denies claim. So the reporter, this John Pauley from CBS, denied the claim that he is the one who actually gave Larry Flynt the tape. Continuing on with the New York Times article. Mr. Pauley, a special assignment reporter for KNXT, a CBS affiliate, said in a statement issued by Andy Sporkin, a KNXT spokesperson, that Mr. Flynt's claim was, quote, an absurd fantasy. Mr. Flynt promised to disclose the identity of the Samurai, but only in Judge Takasugi's chambers. Mr. Flynt played the tape for reporters at his mansion in Bel Air last October 28th, saying the voice of James Timothy Hoffman, a government informant, could be heard threatening Mr. DeLorean's daughter as the auto manufacturer tried to back out of a cocaine deal. At the end of the news conference, Mr. Flynt said the tape had been stolen, meaning somebody in the house had stolen the tape at that very news conference when he aired the tape. Going back to the article here. On November 15th, Judge Takasugi ordered Mr. Flynt to disclose where he got the tape. When he refused, citing freedom of the press, the judge imposed fines now totaling $420,000. Mr. Flynt faces a 60-day jail sentence imposed earlier this week by a federal judge in Chicago who penalized him for throwing a flag at a magistrate in a court appearance. So let's read that last sentence back again. Mr. Flynt faces a 60-day jail sentence imposed earlier this week by a federal judge in Chicago who penalized him for throwing a flag at a magistrate in a court appearance. So the end of this article says he got a 60-day jail sentence, having not for anything to do with with the DeLorean stuff and the missing tape and all that stuff. He threw a flag at a magistrate in a court appearance. So Larry Flynt, this is back to commentary now. Larry Flynt was a very interesting person, to say the least. So going back up in this news article, where it says, quote, Mr. Flynt played the tape for reporters at his mansion in Bel Air last October 28th, saying the voice of James Timothy Hoffman, a government informant, could be heard threatening John Delorean's daughter, and as the audio manufacturer tried to back out of a cocaine deal. At the end of the news conference, Mr. Flynt said the tape had been stolen. My dad was there October 28th as a reporter for Entertainment Tonight in Larry Flynt's house on October 28th when he played the tapes. And my dad, I asked him about this later. I was obviously not there. I was just but a wee boy in October of 1983. That was one of the occurrences, one of the moments where my dad realized back in the early 80s that he did not want to continue a career in Hollywood, that it was all bullcrap, that it was all just stupid smut fluff stories, and it's idiotic. It was all just a circus, and he didn't want to raise his children around any of this. So my dad went to Larry Flynt's house in Bel Air, part of dozens of other reporters, to hear the tape supposedly exonerating, or evidence exonerating John DeLorean in this sting operation by the feds. So my dad goes there, and my dad said he was everywhere he went, like we tried to just go on through a balcony to have a cigarette. Two men with machine guns would be following him around everywhere. They were men with machine guns were following reporters around all over the place. And my dad just thought it was funny that he didn't come home from Vietnam, but maybe 8 years prior, 10 years ish prior to that. He went to Vietnam and was surrounded by machine guns, and then he came home, and now he's in Bel Air in California, surrounded by machine guns again. And he just thought that was very ironic and unsettling at the time, and just crazy that what a world. So my dad was there. Larry Flynt played the tapes, and my dad said the whole time he was there, he's just like, why am I here? This guy, Larry Flynt, this is all a publicity stunt. It doesn't matter what the outcome. It doesn't matter if he gets jail time or a fine. It's going to help him sell magazines. So my dad's already there with a chip on his shoulder, knowing what this whole thing is. And as soon as Larry Flynt said, oh, someone stole the tapes, it was like being at one of those dinner theater murder mystery house party things. It was all such a played up, bogus thing, and my dad really did not have a good experience with it. The whole thing just rubbed him the wrong way, and it was, I hate this phrase, but it was what it was back in the 80s, and my dad had his opinions of it. But that all goes towards Larry Flynt's being a huge proponent for freedom of speech. I think part of it was that he wanted to say, and again, I'm not saying this to besmirch Larry Flynt after he's died, but he was a character, and I think that he did everything that he did. He was a huge proponent for freedom of speech because he wanted to say and do whatever he wanted to bring attention to him and his publishing, him and his magazines, him and his media outlets. So when the judge slapped him with that $420,000 fine, that was a drop in the bucket compared to having the CEO of Hustler on the front page of every newspaper in the country. Do you get what I'm saying there? That was in that case, the kind of freedom of speech that Larry Flynt wanted to protect. But at the same time, it didn't matter if it really was protected, that he would be, exonerated of any charges in regards to free speech, because it was to sell magazines. It was to sell magazines. That's all it was at the end of the day. So yes, he was a huge proponent of freedom of speech. Abso-freaking-lutely. But what were his motives? Very interesting character. Very interesting character. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. Don't go anywhere. Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. Why is it always such a pain in the ass to do anything with the HOA? I don't care where you live. I don't care. Well, I care where you live if you don't have an HOA, and I'm very jealous that you don't have an HOA. But a lot of us listening, especially around the Houston area, have to deal with an HOA to do anything on our own freaking property. And if you can't tell by the inflection of my voice, I am frustrated. And I know that there are many people listening right now who are probably currently frustrated with their HOA. It makes no sense. I pay taxes on this property. It's my property. Why does it have to be pulling teeth to do anything on my own property? Part of me is playing devil's advocate, and I'll tell you what I'm wanting to do here in a moment. It's extremely domestic what I want to do with my own property. But part of me is playing devil's advocate just to keep my own sanity in dealing all of this, is that if the HOA wasn't such a collective butthole, I'll just say, that people would probably wind up doing whatever they really want with their property, and not in a way that benefits their own property value or the property value of their neighborhood. So I understand why the HOA does what it does. You gotta keep that meth head down the street in check, that he can't build his own 80-foot water tower in his backyard made out of balsa wood and like plastic straws, that it's not going to work, that he's going to kill himself or somebody else, and his neighbor doesn't want to look at a big meth head built water tower on the other side of his fence. So I understand why the HOA kind of, exists to keep that kind of thing at bay. But most of the people trying to do something on their own property aren't meth heads on a 4-day bender trying to build their own water tower. That's just not what it is. It's people like me who respect the rules of the neighborhood and respect the neighbors and just don't do meth and don't want to build a 100-foot home-built water tower in their backyard. I just want to build a backyard office. We've had a baby. Lots of people work from home now. My family is no different. It's surprising that how small a house can get when you have one child. So me and probably hundreds of thousands of other Americans, at least Americans, I can only speak for Americans now, hundreds of thousands of us, if not millions, are considering putting an addition on their house in their backyard, building a backyard office. So I am definitely not the only one. And here's the thing. Here's where the heads butt with the HOA. And granted, my wife and I've only been dealing with a representative of the HOA. It's not even somebody who has any sort of clout or leeway. It's like from dealing with this person, and I don't mean any disrespect, and I won't give out who the personal name of this person or anything like that. It's obviously some sort of like nepotism play. I swear this person has they are a sack of meat sitting in that chair. They have no comprehension, and nor was that a job requirement, nor was that having any sort of idea what the homeowner was talking about. That was not anywhere on the application for this person's job at all. Yes, I'm salty, I'm butthurt, I've got a chip on my shoulder, and it makes me just want to like build the thing and just give the giant double-barreled fingers to the HOA when they come around. I tried to tell you what I was doing. I tried to tell you, but the face of the HOA is so gosh darn incompetent that they had no idea what I was talking about. So I figured, screw y'all, I'm just building it, and I'm going to apologize later. If I even do apologize. Probably won't. So what I want to build is the backyard office. Fully finished out. Fully finished with a floor, with drywall, with electrical, with insulation. Just picture a bedroom in the house, but built outside, detached. And the HOA guidelines clearly allow for it. They say a property can have the original dwelling, it can have a detached garage, and one detached accessory building. I explain this to the representative of the HOA, and every time their response, we don't know if it was a man or a woman, their response was, "Sir, you can't have you can't, what is it? You can't have a storage building on your property any higher than your fence line. Like, it's not a storage building. Why aren't you listening to this? Why aren't you paying attention to anything I'm telling you? The response, sir, like I said before, you can't have any sort of storage building any higher than your fence. Okay. Obviously, I'm going to have to go around you because you are not reading anything or you have the IQ of a gnat. But I suspect you're doing this on purpose. I suspect that the HOA makes it difficult like this on purpose, like I said, to keep that methed up dude from building a 100-foot home built water tower in his backyard. That any homeowner dealing with the HOA is going to become so deterred by the process that they're not going to try it. And that is one way that the HOA can keep control. The verbiage of the HOA is so, you absolutely need a lawyer. I live in Missouri City, by the way. And I love Missouri City, don't get me wrong. But I don't think the HOA is any different in Missouri City than it is elsewhere around the country or around the world. It's frustratingly difficult to deal with. So if and when this person responds to me, this representative of the HOA responds in regards to whatever, again, with the whole, is a storage, you can't have storage building, completely disregarding the fact that it's not a freaking storage building. It's not where you're going to keep tools and garden equipment and lawnmowers or anything like that. It's not that. It's a fully furnished dwelling that's going to be built to city code and fire code and with occupants in there. It's going to have everything but plumbing. Good God. So when that person responds to tell me the same thing about the fence line, despite me pointing out the articles in the HOA which say you can have it, it just can't be higher than your original building, meaning it can't be higher than my 2-story house, which it won't be. It's going to be a single story, 10 by 12, possibly maximum 12 by 14, but probably 10 by 12 structure with the roof, with a pitched roof that is no taller than a single story building, and it's going to be shorter than my 2-story house. And it's going to match the house. It's going to be painted like the house. The shingles are going to be the same on the roof. It's going to be the same thing, you incompetent twat. Can I say twat? I just did. We'll see what happens. Is that one of the words I can't say? I don't think it's that bad. Oh my gosh, we'll see. In no way do I regard the FCC in the same disdain that I regard an HOA. So anybody from the FCC listening, can he say twat? Can he say it 7 times like he just did? You're not the same as the person representing the HOA. So I have respect for you, FCC. I have respect for what you do. Have no respect for this representative of the HOA. And holy crap, yes, I'm butthurt about the whole thing. I want to build a backyard office so that I can do my new job, which is to edit videos for the museum. And I need a space for that. You need a separate office space to work like anybody else would have. And it's my own property, and it's going to match the house, and it's going to be so nice. Just let me do it, HOA. Actually, I don't care if you let me do it or not. I'm just going to do it. At the end of the day, just going to do it. I'll follow the rules, and I'll let you know how that process is going. Anyways, thanks for listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Check out geektherapyradio.com for podcasts and more information. And always remember, you are loved. You are worthy of love, giving love and receiving love. Take care. If you'd like to sponsor Geek Therapy Radio, just go to geektherapyradio.com and let's talk.